If you've been trying to conceive and you're feeling like you're not getting anywhere with the treatment options that are available to you, or maybe you suspect there is something missing that perhaps has been dismissed by your doctor, then this episode is for you. Today I'm speaking with a special guest, Michelle Oravitz, who will show you how the ancient practices of Chinese medicine can support your fertility and give you the results that other treatments can't. All of that and more is coming up on today's episode. Welcome to your journey to fertility. This is the podcast that blends science with spirit to give you all the tools you need as you navigate your fertility journey. I'm your host, Jennifer Edmonds, and for the last 15 years, I've been helping women on their journeys to motherhood and beyond. I believe that combining the latest scientific research along with the best energetic and mindset practices will help you to avoid putting your life on hold and bring you closer to your baby. Each week, you'll learn ways to support your fertility and trust your body so that you can stop stressing that you'll never have your baby and finally walk your path to motherhood. This is the Your Journey to Fertility podcast. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm so excited for today's episode. We are speaking with a special guest who is going to be chatting about a topic that I think is crucial when you're on your fertility journey, and that is how the ancient practices of Chinese medicine can support you as you're trying to conceive. But for those who aren't too familiar with these practices, Chinese medicine isn't just about herbs and acupuncture. It's about looking at your body as a whole and incorporating the mind and the spirit as well as the physical body. And it's such a different way of approaching health compared to Western medicine. Michelle Oravitz is an acupuncturist specializing in fertility health. She found her love in Chinese medicine after it helped her through her own menstrual cycle challenges. Michelle is the host of the top-rated podcast called The Wholesome Fertility Podcast, and she recently wrote a new book, The Way of Fertility, which is a deep dive into the energetics of fertility through the lens of ancient wisdom. Michelle has been on a mission to help women get pregnant naturally and via IVF through her one-on-one work at her acupuncture clinic as well as online. Michelle's podcast is also the one that I listened to so much when I was going through infertility and IVF. And it was also one of the first podcasts that I spoke on when I began and started running my own online business a couple of years ago. So she has a little bit of a special place in my heart, and she's an absolute wealth of knowledge. She has such a calming and beautiful energy about her, and I think you're going to get a lot from this conversation. So let's get into it. Here's Michelle. Michelle, welcome to the podcast. I am thrilled to have you here. We have so much to talk about, so much to get through. And we need to talk about this amazing book that you have just written. But before we get into all of that, for people who may not have met you before, can you tell us a bit about your work and what you do?
Of course, Jen, and thank you so much for having me on today. It's so exciting to talk to you again. I've had you on the podcast and I loved talking to you back then, and it's really nice to reconnect. My background, actually, my previous life was in architecture. I was an architect. I had irregular periods, and that was pretty much like, a lot of people that do what we do today, which is what I do is I'm an acupuncturist who specializes in fertility. A lot of people who go into the natural medicine field start out as patients themselves and then feel how amazingly transformative the medicine is. And then, of course, when that transforms our life, we want to scream it through the rooftops and tell people to do it and to do it and help them and learn the medicine that has helped me so much. So basically, that was my story. I mean, I had irregular periods. I went to doctors on and off and was given only one option, which was to get on the birth control pill. And it never made sense to me, not from the beginning. I was actually very surprised. It was my first taste in that aspect of medicine. Not that medicine's bad. There's a lot of great things about medicine, but in some cases, they're not really giving you solutions. It's a Band-Aid. And I knew that at the time. It didn't feel right. I was like, what? I'm like, why the birth control pill? Like, for me, it was just to control birth. And I wasn't even sexually active. So I'm like, why am I given the birth control pill? And the doctor said, well, it's going to give you regular periods. And I said, well, what if I get off? well, you're going to go back to what you are now. I'm like, okay, so I have to take it for the rest of my life. Like none of it made sense. I didn't have to be a doctor, or I didn't have to know about anything natural medicine to know that it didn't make sense. So that was basically my first introduction to that basically you're not going to always get a cure. And it almost like people are even afraid to say that there is a cure, to anything. So many years I've gone on and off the birth control pill, and my previous work, what I was doing for a living was architecture. And I remember I lived in California. I moved to New York, and for a little while I was like, oh, I want to go away. I want to take a little break. Never really felt quite a joy in working in that field. Felt a little bit like a bird in a cage. And it was really nice to just take a little break. So I took a 3-month hiatus, like trip. And the whole time I was away, I was not on the birth control pill. I intuitively knew to get on and off of it, to take breaks. And the whole time I was away, 3 months, 3.5 months, it might have been, I didn't get my period, not once. And I came home and I said to my mom, I finally moved back to New York, and I said, like, this isn't normal. I was 25 at the time. Before, it was kind of like, this isn't normal, but whatever. I don't care. Like, I'm just going to do my thing. But all of a sudden, it was like, it kind of hit me that something was off and I really needed to do something. And she had heard about an acupuncturist named Dr. Lee, who's an older gentleman that worked in Queens. He worked in the basement of his house. The sweetest guy, like just smiles and just so sweet. It's like a Buddha. And so I remember going there and talking to him, and I smelling the smell of Chinese herbs, because he had like raw herbs and a whole like library of Chinese medicine. It was just fascinating to me. Like I see the bookshelves, and I'm like, this is so interesting. And he sat me down, felt my pulse, looked at my tongue, started asking me all kinds of questions. Do you dream? How do you sleep? Do you wake up? Do you pee? Do you, all the things that I'm like, what? I'm like, this is a lot of information, but it was actually kind of nice to be asked that many questions in depth. And it was kind of like, I felt like a different, almost crevices of my life were being like addressed and like, brought to light. And I was like, this is interesting, because it was making me aware of things that I was normally not aware of. And sure enough, he actually regulated my period. And I was like blown away, and also just really intrigued by how it worked. Like every single time I'd go, I'd ask him, what does this point do? What does that point do? I was just so fascinated. Like, this is so simple. And then I started feeling better in general. And I started feeling more aligned. My skin got more clear. I felt more at ease. There was like less stress that I felt, that I wasn't carrying as much stress at work. Working in corporate America, of course, it just comes with a lot of stress. And I just felt so good. And eventually what that did was it kind of like awoke a fire in me, or an itch to change my career. And of course, it awoke a passion in me to learn more about this, like this natural medicine that has been around for thousands of years. My grandmother's always talked to me about those kind of things. She knew we're Middle Eastern Jews. And so she's from Iraq, and she actually would know things from like, it was like books in Egypt, but it was in Arabic. So she read Arabic. I didn't, of course. And I was like, how do I get my hands? Later on, as I got older, there was a lot more like information and a lot more books about natural medicine and remedies. So long story short, fast forward, I eventually got married. Um, Also, was working a lot on my mind and affirmations, and it was kind of all simultaneously at around the same time that I realized that my mind and my thoughts had impact on my life. Met my husband, who I'm still with, love of my life, and he's an ER doctor. He kind of pushed me to, do what I wanted to do, and kind of mirrored to me, you are not really, or reflected to me how I wasn't really happy doing what I was doing, and why don't you just go back to school? And then moved to Florida, went back to school, studied Ayurveda. I know this is like a long story. I'll cut it short too, but eventually went back to study acupuncture. And I know, had it not been for Dr. Lee, I would have had a longer time getting pregnant, if even, I don't know, a very hard time. So I'm very thankful that I caught it early on, but I definitely don't even know if I was ovulating. I have no idea what my cycle was doing. I probably had undiagnosed PCOS because I had a lot of signs, like 2 out of 3 that I know for sure, but I've never even done the ultrasound to see were my ovaries polycystic. So
Mm.
yeah, so looking back, I mean, just so many things that acupuncture helped me with. And then I, of course, went back to school and then was always intrigued in women's health, working with
Mm.
women. I just like always had an affinity to doing that. And I eventually just really decided to specialize. I got ABORM certified, and now I do in-person and online coaching. I just love working with fertility. It's just something that I really enjoy. And it's almost like I can't explain
Mm.
what it is. I just
And
really
it
have
sounds
an
like
affinity.
falling.
Yeah. What's that?
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that, Michelle. I feel like it's just your calling and you can tell, and
Yes.
we come to these things in such a roundabout way. We get there and you just know in your bones that this is what you're meant to be doing. I love your
Yeah.
story, and I love this picture that you created about walking into the Chinese medicine clinic for the first time and just being struck by the difference in the way that they approach health, and even what you said about him asking you questions about your body and your life. And you think about how often does that happen in the Western medical world? Your doctor has 15 minutes, if that, and it's like, great, what can I prescribe you? How can I get you out of my office and on with your day? It's a really different approach. And it's
Hmm.
funny that we look at Chinese medicine as kind of alternative medicine, but really it was there long before doctors and surgeries and all of the drugs that we have today came along. I mean, it's been around for thousands of years. And I think people don't realize that in hospitals in China, things like acupuncture and herbs are still used extensively alongside things like surgery and drugs. So
Yeah.
it's not some kind of out there woo-woo type of medicine. It is very, very much based in science and has been, widely clinically proven. So, can we talk a little bit about Chinese medicine and acupuncture in particular, and how it actually works and supports fertility? I mean, how did it help you regulate your cycle?
Yes. So the way we approach, well, Chinese medicine as a whole, has two major pillars, and there, of course, there's a lot of other tools, but the two major pillars that we really depend on is or utilize is the Chinese herbs. So lots of Chinese formulas. And so that's kind of like our pharmaceutical aspect. And then the acupuncture, which is more energetic. And some actually in China, some practitioners will only do herbs and some will only do acupuncture. They get that specialized. Here, a lot of us, we do both. We utilize both. And the herbals, of course, are a lot more chemical, and they can improve things like heat, or almost like elements within our body if we have like too much dampness. So the herbs kind of work on the elements. We are kind of like walking ecosystems, and we'll have tendencies, like some people have a little more dampness in their body. They'll tend to retain water a little bit more. They might be more cold. And the reason why sometimes they'll retain water, sometimes there could be many different reasons for why. And that's the many different patterns. So that's why we don't treat symptoms, we treat patterns. So somebody can tend to retain a lot of water. One of the reasons is their digestion isn't working really well. It's a little more sluggish. So they're not able to like really move the water through. Another reason could be their hot aspect of their body, the more yang aspect. Yang is a little more heating, yin is a little more moist and cooling. So the yang aspect, the fire is not high enough. It could be almost a little too cold. And if you think about it, what happens when the fire is low, water will accumulate because it almost needs to work together. And then the water can be transformed almost into like a mist, if you
Mm.
imagine that. And if the fire is not high enough, the water will start to accumulate. And so we look at the body in that way. And so a lot of the herbs will work more so on the elemental aspects. and more of the chemical aspects, but also the energetics as well, and the blood, and the acupuncture. So that's the crossover, the chi, which is life force vitality. Yes, it's energy, but it's not just energy. It's like an intelligent life force. And that aspect is addressed in herbs, but it is also addressed in acupuncture and the blood, getting the blood moving. And it's really fascinating because I actually did put this on Instagram. I shared a post of, I don't know if you've seen this before, but they basically took the blood of a person prior to and after having acupuncture, and they only did 4 points. So it was the same points. Actually, it was paired. So it was actually 2 points, but on both sides. So like 1 point on right and left, and then the right and left hand, and the other one on the right and left foot. And so they did this for only 15 minutes, and you could see the blood in the beginning being a little more, the blood cells being more sluggish and sticking together, more congealed. This is something that we talk about in textbook. You'll find when you're learning about it. When it's sluggish and sticking together, it's a little bit more stagnant. And also you'll see that sometimes the blood vessels, I mean, not the blood, the blood cells are a little bit less spherical. They're a little bit more like crunched. If it looks like less, almost like watered. And then afterwards, you'll see them moving, a lot more space between them, and they're like a lot bigger. They look more oxygenated and more alive and more spherical. And it's like, it blows your mind because we learn this in textbooks, but we don't see it with our eyes. And that was the first time I saw it with my eyes, like literally. And I remember sharing it, and who really, a lot of people responded, but the most response I got was from other acupuncturists that know what I'm talking about, because this is like what they learned in school as well. They're like, oh my God, this is what it means when they say move blood, like oxygenate blood, more chi, more energy. So that pretty much is what it does. It pretty much like stimulates the body. And we usually will create a formula of herbs or in a formula of a combination of acupuncture points based on a person's pattern. So there are many different ways to treat. We do points based on the pattern to regulate the pattern, so that if a person has stagnation, we'll move it. There's certain points that specifically are for blood, for kidneys, specific, whatever they need. Plus, we'll also do local points and the abdomen, and that does bring almost an alarm to the body to bring more blood flow, because it's like a controlled injury. So it creates an immune response. And actually in studies, it's been shown that it increases blood flow to the uterus and in the uterine artery. So that's pretty fascinating. So that, of course, feeds the uterus and the ovaries with lots of fresh blood. So whatever you're doing with the herbals, and even if they're doing IVF, which I usually don't mix with herbs, just FYI, if anybody's listening, they should not be taking herbs if they are doing IVF and taking hormones. But whatever it is that you're taking, whether it's supplements, nutrition, all of that is carried with blood. And so when you're taking that specifically, like on one part, and then also getting the acupuncture to move that blood, you're nourishing more. You're just really supporting all the nutrients to go where they're supposed to go. So that's one of the ways. And then we also do auriculotherapy in the ear. The whole ear reflects the whole body. So sometimes you can get really detailed with that. And like I mentioned before, like there's niches to all of this, and some people only do ears. I do pretty much a lot of it, like all of it, but some people they get so specific that is all they do, and they heal and they do amazing things with that. So it's like a circuit, a circuit of energy. And once you get that moving, the body's able to self-heal better. It helps with the nervous system. I mean, it does so much, but it's very interwoven, interconnected, and kind of a complicated system to explain, but it's not so complex. It's actually a very simplistic way to get things working.
And it's that opposite to Western medicine,
isn't it? If you have a heart problem and you go to a cardiologist, they're just going to treat your heart, or if you've got a knee injury and you go to a physio, you just treat the knee. Whereas Chinese medicine is really looking at the body as a whole, isn't it? And
Correct.
seeing
Yes.
how one thing impacts the other. And let's look at the whole body as a system that works as an interwoven thing. And, if you think about fertility, I mean, it's not just looking at the reproductive organs, it's looking at the
Correct.
endocrine system, looking at, your nervous system and whether you are regulated and all these things that fit together. So I just love that it is such just a beautiful holistic way to look at the body and to treat the body. You mentioned IVF a little bit about how we shouldn't be taking herbs when we're mixing that with IVF drugs, as I think many IVF doctors will make clear. But IVF
Hmm.
doctors are usually, I have found in my experience, quite a fan of acupuncture, and they'll send a
Yes.
lot of patients to acupuncture. But is it something that we should be doing in the lead up? Is it just during the cycle? Is it just before transfer, just after? How does acupuncture fit into the IVF process?
That is such a great question. And a lot of people will come to me and they'll ask, like, when should I do it? What should I do? The best thing to do. So I look at it in like two parts. Okay. So the first part is the retrieval. So with the retrieval, you're really trying to prepare the egg in the best possible way. So like I would do the same thing with a retrieval that I would do with natural medicine, with a natural pregnancy. Um, and if people obviously want to do it without IVF,
Mm.
and that is really focus on the blood coming to the ovaries and really nourishing and prepare for that egg quality. And what I usually typically will use is also supplements at the time to support as well. But I always say about 3.5 months is ideal because it takes 3.5 months, probably like 3+ months for eggs to mature. But you want to give it time because, like,
Mm.
if you think about it, even more than that, because it takes time for whatever it is that you're taking to really get assimilated into your body. So, like the nutrients
Mm.
to assimilate the nutrients better and that the nutrients can really make a difference on your body, you would want to even do that before the 3 months, technically. But if you don't have the time, and it's sometimes, honestly, I see people a month before, you're still going to get benefits. But ideally, you really give it like the good amount of time for your body to really get nurtured and nourished. And a lot of times people feel like they have to do things quickly, their eggs are going to run out. And I'm just going to say your eggs are not going to run out in a couple of months, and you're much better off preparing them so that you have the best chance of quality in those 3 months, after those 3 months, than to rush into something and then maybe get another egg or two, but then the quality is not so great.
Mm.
And one of the ways to get quality is through regular acupuncture, doing certain supplements, eating proper for your body, making sure you're not eating things that you're sensitive to that cause inflammation. But then on top of it, I also work a lot on mindset because the mind is so important. It's an asset that we often ignore because it's so abstract and it's so hard to look at that, and we get so distracted by what's in front of us and the numbers and this and that, like that it almost gets ignored. But it probably is the single most powerful thing asset that we can use. And then the second part is once we do have retrievals and, hopefully good embryos on ice and everything's prepared, then we work on the uterine lining. And so switch out some supplements sometimes and then work on really preparing emotionally, physically. I'll do sometimes hypnosis too on top of it to prepare for the lining and receptivity. Get people, I like to kind of like throw everything at it. And then, and that's pretty much what I'll work on. Like a lot of times I'll do like on the ear, the uterus point, really work on the spleen, Chinese medicine, spleen and stomach, produce the blood, digestions. We continue on digestion throughout and really support that blood flow
Mm. Mm.
during that time.
I There was one thing you mentioned earlier about this idea of the mind being so powerful and how that kind of comes into helping your nervous system regulate and, how important that is. And I used to find when I went to acupuncture, I don't think I knew in depth how it worked sort of scientifically and how it worked for fertility. But the one thing I always noticed in my acupuncture sessions was that I would go into this like beautiful, half awake, half asleep kind of state where I was just so peaceful and so relaxed. And that feeling would stay with me for a while after the session. So I think that a lot of this stuff is incredibly helpful with bringing our nervous systems into a state of regulation. But can you explain how that actually works and why is it so important for fertility?
That is such a good question. I talk to my patients about this all the time, and everybody says the same thing. It's as if they were kind of taken out of their body, but they're in and out of the body. It's like somebody's flickering the light and they're in and out, in and out. They go into some kind of weird place, sometimes visual, sometimes coming back, sometimes in and out, like forgetting where they are. They feel like they melt into the table, like weird things. That's usually not for everybody. It's only when you really allow the treatment in and you really like flow into it. And when that happens, this is just kind of my observation of it, because I do think that as much as we try to explain it, there's a bit of a mystery here that we can't even really put into words, even us practitioners. And I don't know, I think there's this element of this that is a little bit more like mystical, I will say. And I feel like the way I see it is I feel like you literally thin the veil between yourself, your body, and the quantum field, and you're recalibrating. And that is where the healing, it like reorders and reorganizes, and it takes you out and it just recalibrates your system. And then you come back, and then all of a sudden people will have to like have a massive bowel movement. Sorry, it sounds really bad, but things like that, like all of a sudden, boom, like they're just releasing. They'll either cry, they just like things will come out, they'll sleep forever. And they're like, why am I so tired? I'm like, because you haven't allowed yourself to rest. You've been on like adrenaline for years, and your body's like, like I'm just going to catch up to myself. And you can't fight it. It's going to like, it almost flushes you into this regulating process, and you're in a wave, and it's just like, it could be very strong. Some people almost have a bit of a healing crisis. It's not always the case. Some people may need a lot of healing and they feel amazing. Like even if you would think that they would have a healing crisis and they feel phenomenal. Like, so it's an interesting thing. And it is like, we're so unique, every single body responds differently. It's like a fingerprint. Everybody has a different perspective or change or shift or symptoms. There's symptoms that do occur from the healing process sometimes. And that could be like a lot of release or a lot of sleep or a lot of emotions or having so much energy, like all of a sudden. And there's just so many different things that come up, and then things start to regulate and calibrate. And it's a fascinating thing. It's almost like an interesting thing that I cannot fully explain, but this is like what I'm observing with my patients.
Yeah. And when you've been trying to conceive for a long period of time, months and years, as I'm sure you see so many of your patients, you are running on adrenaline for such a long period of time. And we don't even realize it. And it's not until you go to something like an acupuncture session or, with my students, they come and do a breathwork session or they just stop and breathe for a few minutes and you realize, oh my goodness, what have I been holding on to this whole time? So do you find that people that come to you are in that kind of state? Are you finding that they are running on this awful system of fight or flight all the time? And do you think that these beautiful treatments and things that you teach and practice with your patients, are they helping to have a long-term effect on the nervous system as well?
Absolutely. And I remember one of my teachers saying that if you learn to truly listen to your patients, you will heal them before you insert your first needle.
Oh.
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like so many people are underserved and they are not being listened to, and they come feeling like, what okay, now I'm going to curse. So like, what the fuck is going on? No, and they just don't understand. Like, I mean, they feel their intuition's telling them something, and whatever they're telling, sometimes the medical team, comes, they get a pushback on it, or they want to like look more into thyroid or whatever it is that they feel intuitively, or they're not listened to, or their miscarriage is being brushed off. And just, just try again, go home, just try again. Like there's no, it feels like people aren't really being heard. And this isn't my words. This is really just me reflecting what I see. And I think that one of the things that they feel is like for the first time when they're able to just speak and explain things and talk and like talk about everything and shed light, like I felt when I went to Dr. Lee, just like really express what's going on and being able to like be heard and validated and seen, just that by itself is so healing. So I feel like that is a big part of it, is that nurturing. I mean, what can I say? It feels very isolating for a lot of people.
It does. It does. And you're absolutely right. Just that ability to be heard. Can we talk a little bit more about the intuition part? Because I find this really fascinating. And I'm sure you see it over and over again. Like you said, women will have just a feeling or an inkling about their bodies, and they'll go and ask their doctors, and they get brushed off a lot of the time. They think that there's something more going on. I mean, I was told by a doctor when I was 34 that I'd gone through early menopause. And I knew that wasn't it. It's like, well, there's not much we can do. Just try IVF. That's pretty much your only option. Turns out that wasn't the only option. But why is it so important for women to listen to that intuition? And even more important, how can we listen to that when we're being told that we're wrong?
That is such a good question. You have great questions. And I've had a lot of people in very similar situations as you that were told, not even just by one doctor, by two doctors, similar things. I remember having somebody on my podcast that was told, you cannot get pregnant with your own eggs. And she said, well, can you just give me a number? And she goes, yeah. She goes, you have less than 1% chance of getting pregnant with your own eggs. Turns out she ends up going to another doctor, really crying it out, getting in tune with like her feelings, allowing it. But she knew that wasn't true for her. And there's nothing wrong with egg donor. There's nothing wrong with embryo donor. There's nothing wrong with adoption if that's for you. And I've had another person on, Nancy Weiss. She's a great spiritual, like, fertility coach, and she knew that embryo adoption, it was like a light went off. She knew that was for her. And it's that calling, it's that knowing. Now, had she listened, had the person just her name was Jasmine. Had she listened to the less than 1% chance and bought into it, she wouldn't have had the kids that she had now. And I really do believe that things are meant to be. Like, she was drawn to that and she knew. So that intuition really matters. And I could tell you story upon story upon story. I've had another person was told she was approaching early menopause based on her numbers, or another doctor from different doctors from two different countries. I like to talk about her story a lot, just because two different doctors in two different countries are telling you can't do it. So like, she still listened to her intuition. She ended up getting pregnant naturally and having two kids. Naturally, the kids she was meant to have. So that is why, I could tell you these stories, and those stories just by themselves are evidence for why you should listen to your intuition, why you cannot put all your, I guess you could say eggs, no pun intended, in one basket, and really truly like believe in everything that people are telling you if it doesn't feel aligned in your gut. And that's not to say not to listen to doctors. You can get a bunch of different opinions. Sometimes changing doctors will change your outcome if something doesn't feel right. So connecting with that intuition could be very hard when you're getting so much distraction and so many different voices and opinions, and that voice can sometimes overshadow your own. And this is why I speak about this. I speak a lot about it in the book, is like getting quiet, because, an amazing quote, I don't remember who said it, but it was that prayer is talking and meditation is listening. And sometimes we have time to talk and get distracted, and sometimes we have to listen. I'm not talking about listen to the outside noise. I'm talking about listen to yourself. And when you get into a state of receptivity, you are actually allowing for an opportunity for yourself to connect with a vast intelligence. That same intelligence is what tells your cells what to do. Your body's intelligent. Why wouldn't you be? Why wouldn't you be connected to a grander intelligence? That it doesn't stop at the edge of your skin. It's got to keep going on and on. So there's something obviously that tells the ants what to do, that tells the birds what to do. Like there's something guiding nature, and we are not separate from nature. So getting quiet, sitting in nature, really connecting can help with your intuition.
And it's really hard to do
It
is. And that's probably one of the things I hear the most when students come and work with me for the first time. That they say, I hate sitting in meditation. It's so hard. It's so boring. I'm fidgeting. I can't stop my thoughts. And I find that is, the product of the world that we live in. We are surrounded by so many stimuli and there's so much going on. And at what point in our lives are we ever taught just to sit in the silence and listen to what our body is telling us? And, in every class that I teach, I get my students to put their hands on over their womb space and just ask their bodies, is there anything their body wants to tell them? And it never ceases to amaze me what people then say comes up. These things aren't. Yeah, it is. It's this beautiful intersection of the slightly spiritual and the scientific realms kind of intersecting, which is, what this whole podcast is about and why I love this kind of work so much. And so thank you for sharing that. I find that it is when you are able to find a way just to listen to your body, even if it's for a couple of minutes a day, gosh, that just changes things so much, doesn't it?
It really does.
Really does.
Your body's so intelligent.
Oh, and well past fertility, let's zoom out and just use that as a tool for your life, as a whole moving forward. I mean, throughout motherhood, throughout your whole rest of your life. It's not just something that you'll use as you're trying to conceive. So thank you for sharing.
Exactly.
That. Yeah. When we are experiencing fertility problems, and, for so many people, it really is a medical issue in a lot of cases. So we have to get doctors involved. And, we're so lucky that we live in an age where there are medical interventions that are going to help us. But you know that our Western doctors are very specifically trained. They usually have the tools of, pharmaceuticals or surgery available to them. And that is not their fault, and there's nothing wrong with that. That is just the way that they're trained. But you mentioned before that some things get missed, and when you are going through that Western medical route. So what are the things that we often find are overlooked that are things that Chinese medicine can address?
Well, Chinese medicine addresses the spirit. And that is something that is often ignored. They study humans. They kind of looked at humans as alive, and not. You cannot study spirit with cadavers. I hate to sound kind of like blunt, but that aspect of it is that we are not just the physical aspect of ourselves. There's something else. And that is something that Chinese medicine will look at. And not to say that they miss it, because I do really, I think that everybody has a different vantage point. Like, thank God that we can go and, somebody, God forbid, something really bad happens and you can go right into surgery and you have incredible. I think that what medicine needs to do is just come together and know what their strengths are and really focus on the niches. You know what I mean? Everybody has their thing. With Chinese medicine, they'll look at of course, they can't do trauma as well. I mean, they do help with trauma in China, but they don't. The surgery is the surgery. Sometimes you need surgery, and then sometimes you have major bacterial infection. You need antibiotics. I mean, so there are definitely there's a place for everything, but the subtleties and really understanding that every organ has a spirit. Even the organs have a personality and they have roles. And they look at them almost like little personalities. Like they all have like a different emotion. They have different elements. They have different patterns and ways of being and roles that they play in the body. And so they look at the spirit really of everything. And they consider the spirit, they acknowledge the spirit as being part of the whole with humans, and that actually manifests as the physical. And so sometimes you can treat just the physical, but sometimes you have to treat the spirit. The spirit's almost like the root where things come forth from. So you look at like the blooming tree, and then it's having a hard time blooming. You don't go to the branches, you go to the root. Sometimes maybe you can cut the branches and maybe that'll help. But a lot of times you have to look at the system, as a whole. And so that aspect of it, the fact that they acknowledge like really all the different parts of ourselves is what makes it really special.
It is very special. It's just such a beautiful way of combining everything, I find. You talk a little bit on your podcast and within your content that you put out on social media about emotions and how they have such an impact on the body physically. And I think this is, again, something that we don't really ever get told or taught. And it's definitely not something that we give a lot of credit to. But how can our emotions affect our physical health, especially when we're trying to conceive?
Oh, in so many ways. I mean, when you look at like, it's not really specifically an emotion, but I mean, even stress, which is kind of, anxiety and stress. So stress can cause us to constrict. I mean, who doesn't feel tight when they're stressed, And you almost have to like really breathe into it to like release it. You get that massage, just like, let it go. Like, and so we hold on, and it can create a lot of blocks. And so the liver's job is to ensure free flow of energy. And if we get constricted, that actually backs up the liver and makes the liver's job harder. So we have it's a pattern called liver qi stagnation. And probably every single person on the planet nowadays has a level of that. And so it's important to kind of ensure that free flow, but that can impact hormones. It can impact your menstrual cycle. It can impact so many things. The liver is really important. It can also impact like fibroids, and there's so many things that are linked to the liver. And if it's like too depleted, it doesn't have enough blood flowing through, that also impacts the menstrual cycle. And then you look at the heart, which is such an important aspect. And a lot of anxiety could impact the heart, and the heart can impact how we feel as well. So like if there's an issue with the heart, like blood stagnation or qi stagnation or deficiency, it can impact our anxiety, or not anxiety, but just other emotions. And it can impact how we see the world. So Chinese medicine sees the heart as housing the mind. And if there's an imbalance in the heart, it's going to impact the mind. If there's an imbalance in the mind, it's going to impact the heart. And now we're actually seeing that science is catching up in things like heart math, where they look at heart-brain coherence, and they say the brain and the heart have an incredible relationship with each other. And that the more coherent the brain and heart are, the more feelings of peace and ease and joy that you have. But the more incoherent they are, the more discomfort we feel, the more we're in fight and flight. So it's really fascinating that we can actually measure now this relationship that Chinese medicine has been talking about for thousands of years.
Yeah, literally thousands of years.
Yeah.
And the heart also has an incredible connection with the womb as well.
Correct. Yes. Thank you for bringing that up. Yes.
Can you talk more about that?
Yes, it does. It actually has a very, very important connection, and its role. It actually has a vessel that connects to the womb that is called the Bao Mai. And so basically it's a vessel deep within the body that connects the heart and the womb. And the role that the heart has on the womb is to open it. And I talk about this in the book. This is kind of my own hypothesis, just based on information that I'm putting together. But basically, oxytocin is considered the love hormone. And it's that feeling of bonding and connecting and, that love, that feeling of love. And what's interesting is that oxytocin, as it raises, we know that it opens the womb for a child to be birthed, and it starts labor. We know that. And it can create uterine raises, it elevates around ovulation for women. Women tend to have a little bit more of it. And that's why women will tend to bond after sex versus men who don't have as much of it. So they won't have that same kind of attachment. But women will, because their oxytocin is a little higher. And what's interesting is that, so the oxytocin raises around ovulation. It also raises for men too after orgasm, but it also raises for women after orgasm. And nipple stimulation, just kind of FYI. So what's interesting to me is if you think about oxytocin as being a love hormone and kind of like really embodying what is being referred to as like the role of the heart, then may that have something to do with the heart uterus connection, the fact that it actually opens the uterus. So it can open the uterus possibly to receive, and it can open the uterus once it is able to let the baby out. So I find that to be kind of fascinating.
It is. And that is so beautiful. And just the way that you explain that at all, just it's so intricate and it all makes so much sense. Our bodies are so damn clever. It's like, when did we forget how clever our bodies were? We really have. Michelle, you've written a book. You've written a whole book. I can't believe what an undertaking this must have been. Can we talk about your book, what it is about, and how it's going to help people who are trying to conceive?
Yes. So my book is really based on kind of like the heart of Chinese medicine, which is Taoism, really what it's based on, like ancient medicine. Also some of the things that Ayurveda talks about, like the things that the Vedas talk about, like just really the wisdom that we learn. And what you'll find with ancient medicine, ancient wisdom, is that it often will lead you to go within. There's always these kind of signposts to go within. There's always been the teachings like go within, you want to really connect with yourself, go within. Yoga is all about really feeling your body, being connected from the inside out. So it is not a like take this supplement, do this thing. It's not another how to, but it will direct you to go within to connect with that connection, that intelligence.
Yeah.
And so it really guides you. It talks about awareness and how awareness is your superpower. It talks about the heart uterus connection. It talks about the power of love and why love is so crucial in our early years of development. And I say to myself, if babies need it to survive, what makes you think that babies don't need it to emerge and to be conceived? That love is life-giving. And we deprive ourselves of it, obviously, when we're going through some difficult things, which also has its place. We go through our emotions, and I talk about also just validating that and not saying right or wrong, just being with. And that's kind of a way to self-love and self-compassion and mothering yourself. So it really is kind of like a love letter. I see it like, but it's also an actionable how-to, and it talks a lot about the scientific research. A lot of it will talk about the correlation, and I had mentioned a couple of studies or research and things like heart math that really do correspond to what ancient medicine has been talking about for thousands of years. And so it's interesting. It's an interesting like thing to learn about, but it's also a lot of things that you can do, like a lot of exercises to get you more in tune with yourself. And I always call it just like a path to come back home. When you come back home to yourself, you feel more aligned, more whole, and you can make decisions with more clarity. And it just assists you throughout this really confusing journey.
Oh, I get chills when you speak like that. This idea of just coming home to your body. It almost makes me feel emotional. It's just such a gift that you can give yourself. and your baby and your future. I mean, the things that you're speaking about have far-reaching effects, well past just conceiving a baby. I mean, this is about the rest of your life. So thank you for sharing all of that. Where can people find your book? Where can they learn more about you? And what's the best place to connect with you?
Yes, thank you. So they can go to my website, michelleoravitz.com. On there, if you go michelleoravitz.com/The Way of Fertility, you'll find out more about the book. You can get a first chapter for free if you want, or, you have access to buy the book. It's on Amazon, it's everywhere. And I like to hang out on Instagram. It's pretty much where, like, my favorite social media spot to hang out. I learn a lot there. It's a lot of fun. And that's at the Wholesome Lotus Fertility. And I have the Wholesome Fertility podcast. I know it's confusing because they're all like a lot of wholesomes with different combinations. But yeah, that's michelleoravitz.com. You can't go wrong. You can find my podcast there. You can find the book there. You can find my social media there and everything.
Amazing. And I will put links to all of those in the show notes. Michelle, thank you so much for giving us your time, sharing your wisdom. And I think that people are going to get so much from this today. And I can't recommend your teachings and your book more highly. I think people are going to get so much from it. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me on today, Jen.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode today. Michelle is just such an expert in this space, and I hope that you got a lot out of that conversation. Now, just before we finish up, a reminder that the countdown is on. The waitlist to my upcoming In Your Element Fertility Yoga program is now open. This is a once-a-year opportunity to go deep into some of the ancient practices that Michelle and I spoke about today. To celebrate this year, I am running a free 3-day live event, which kicks off on May 28th. So save the date in your calendar. In this free live series, I'll be showing you how I've helped hundreds of women on their own fertility journeys. Just use the practices of yoga, breathwork, and meditation to support their fertility. It will help you synchronize your hormones and just give you all of those practical tools that you need to manage the stress and anxiety of trying to conceive. The live series will be recorded, so you'll have access to those trainings and you can then practice them at home. So if you would like to join me, pop your name on the waitlist by visiting elementpilatesyoga.com/waitlist or click the link in the show notes. If you are new to fertility yoga, I am so excited to share these practices with you in depth. Now, on the next episode of the podcast, I will be sharing my exact process for managing triggers and the anxiety that they cause when you're trying to conceive. This is something that is just so unavoidable when you're struggling with fertility. So this is an episode that everyone needs to listen to. So until then, I am sending you all my wishes as you continue your own journey to fertility.
The most common thing I hear from students who are on their fertility journey is that the stress of trying to conceive has taken over their life. Your days end up being filled with endless appointments, navigating pregnancy announcements. You're trying to eat right, take all your supplements, and it is all you think about from the moment you wake up. I designed the Element Fertility Yoga course to support your body, your mind, and your mental health in 3 important ways: to synchronize your hormones, increase circulation and blood flow, and to help regulate your nervous system. But on top of this, the greatest gift that you can give yourself throughout this journey is a sense of peace, to help you calm your mind and just make this process feel easier. Every single one of my students tell me that this is the first thing they notice after starting a yoga, meditation, and breathwork practice. But on top of this, you have the amazing benefit of actually supporting and increasing your fertility. Studies have shown that those participating in mind-body programs as they're trying to conceive have success rates 3 times greater than those who don't. The course I've designed walks you through natural conception as well as fertility treatments and IVF cycles. And the best part is you can work through it at your own pace in the comfort of your home. The practices start from just 10 minutes per day. To learn more, visit elementpilatesyoga.com or see the link in the show notes.